Happy Easter. Welcome back to our Adler Values program. There will be no chocolate eggs left on the doorstep of Ontario's tax-paying ratepayers this holiday, just rotten ones. Here's a core commandment, an energy policy that makes sense. Dalton McGuinty breaking that golden rule. His green dream has become a fiscal nightmare. Electricity rates soon to be the highest in North America, thanks to heavy government subsidies, all in a fruitless effort to magically create a green manufacturing sector. Only problem is, it's not working. Not only is Premier Dad wasting billions of our dollars, the few fake green jobs created are killing private sector jobs. It's a lose-lose instead of a win-win. I mean, people are starting to figure it out, by the way. Coming from far and wide to pick up signs of protest this week. For more, let's go to Tom Harris from the International Climate Science Coalition. Tom, I think the folks are starting to figure it out. It's taken a while. There hasn't been enough mainstream media clearly paying attention to it. People who are protesting are thanking Sun News for covering protests while the mainstreamers are ignoring it. But I want you to have your shot at the big picture here.
Well, the big picture is that the environmental movement as a whole has been hijacked by climate campaigners. I mean, the fundamental foundation of all of these plans, whether it's green jobs for solar power or $7 billion worth of wind turbines, if you dig into it, what you find is it's the attempt to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. In fact, McGuinty boasts that Ontario is leading the world in its reduction of carbon dioxide emissions. And, of course, the main way they're doing this is by closing our coal stations. The trouble is they don't really have reliable power to fill in. So we're going to end up just simply being energy poor and having to import a lot from the United States.
But one of the ways that McGuinty has managed to shut down emissions is what you and I talked about a long time ago. He's shutting down manufacturing. He's shutting down industrial activity. He's shutting down economic growth. And, of course, what that does is do exactly what environment radicals really want, because that's their, they talk about the hidden agenda that Harper has. I don't know about Harper's hidden agenda. It doesn't seem very hidden to me. But the environmentalist hidden agenda is they want the industrial revolution to grind to a halt, and they're getting it in Ontario.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate because Dalton McGuinty, I don't know whether he's naive or he's purposely choosing to only look at one side of issues. I mean, we should be basing our energy policies, our environment policies on real science, real engineering, real economics, and actually looking at the real consequences of our choices. He seems to think that we can switch over to these very unreliable, very expensive energy sources and there'll never be any real consequences, except hopefully he'll get more votes. I suppose that's what he's going for. But as you pointed out, the real consequences of these energy policies not only are bad for the economy, but they're very bad for the environment itself. A poor country or poor province just simply doesn't have the resources to protect its environment in the long run.
Tom, do you get the impression that even though Ontario's got, millions of people, biggest province in Canada, even though the problems are now obvious, that somehow there's something really wrong with the political system that Dalton McGuinty can get away with it? I mean, I understand that he had the majority for the longest time, and now he's got a minority. It just seems to me that he's getting away with murder on this one. Does it not seem to you that the political system is missing a few bulbs?
Yeah, I think so. And I think there should be some sort of requirement that when government committees, whether they're provincial committees or federal committees that are looking at the environment, they must be required by law to actually look at the full picture, not just look at what they want to look at. Until recently, no committees in Canada, either provincial or federal, had been looking at, for example, both sides of the climate and the energy issue. And there's really no excuse for this because, for example, a lot of our government officials and top military leaders and thousands of media will be in Chicago for the NATO summit coming up in May. Now, it turns out that there's a conference, it was just announced 2 hours ago by press release, called Real Science, Real Choices. And as they say here, it's going to be in Chicago immediately after, a mile and a half away from the NATO summit. So there's no excuse for our politicians that are at the NATO summit and the thousands of media. They just have to walk a mile and a half and they can be at this conference. And as it says, the program features approximately 60 science and policy experts exploring what real climate science is saying about the causes and especially the consequences of climate change policy like wind turbines and other things. So really this conference, and it's the top thing on our webpage right now since it was just announced 2 hours ago, Our webpage is climatescienceinternational.org. That conference should be a mandatory thing for our committees on environment, both federally and provincially, to send their people to.
Tom, I think everyone in Ontario, everyone in the country, everyone in Western Civ now understands you can't do any kind of development at all unless you offer the government an environmental impact study. Everything gets bogged down because of so-called environmental impact studies. Why are there never any economic impact studies done on whack job environmental policy, I ask you?
Yeah, well, they do some environmental studies, but of course they only bring in the selected environmental, or I should say economic people that they want to hear from, the people who say that building wind turbines will create more jobs and things like that, how we can lead the world in energy production and green power. I mean, they very rarely bring in the Ross McKittricks, who's an economist from Guelph University, or people from the Fraser Institute, who can tell you, look, if you impoverish your nation due to a lack of energy and a lack of jobs, you damage the environment. So you make sure that our energy sources are secure and solid for the future. The experimentation is fine. You know, going off and doing experiments at NRC with wind turbines and having, pilot projects in the prairies, that's fine. But the idea that you can replace our baseload energy supply with these flimsy sources, this is actually very dangerous, and people should be quite concerned about this. It takes many years.
I'm well concerned, and I want everyone to go to the website immediately, International Science Coalition.
ClimateScienceInternational.org.
ClimateScienceInternational.org. I should have known that by now. We've had you on for a few visits. Have a happy Easter, Tom, to you and your family and your coalition. Thank you so much.